If you were a kid who played video games in the early 2000s and you had access to a computer, then there's a pretty good chance that you played at least one in-browser Flash game. Something like Club Penguin, Webkins, Line Riders, stuff like that. But amongst these games, there was a specific genre that was way harder to make in a free online form: first-person shooters. I recently put up a video on this very topic where I played a bunch of modern in-browser FPS games and explored some of my favorites that I remember from my childhood. But the most frequent comment that I got on that video, other than people telling me to lower my mouse sensitivity, were people talking about their own childhood games that I forgot to mention. So I took all your comments, I crunched the numbers, and I made a list of the most popular games I missed so we could take a look back at the games that defined your childhood. In the previous video, I laid out some rules about not needing to download anything or sign up for accounts, but we're dropping that this time, because honestly, a lot of these games aren't hosted online anymore, so I had to go through some weird loopholes to get them running, but I still did my best to try to get gameplay of all the games that I could. That being said, I did have to dig through some nasty ass sites and download some sketchy files that likely put Russian spyware on my computer just to get some of these games working, so you're welcome for my sacrifice. But here they are, your favorite browser FPS games. Starting out, this game was by far one of the most mentioned games, and once I played it, I immediately understood why. Phosphor 2 is an interesting game. It feels very Halo, very Quake. It's super obviously inspired by a bygone era of first-person shooters. This game wasn't playable online, but I was able to find it on this beautiful, beautiful program called Flashpoint that has an insane collection of dead and forgotten Flash games in it. I will likely make a whole video just on that later. But for now, let's just get into Phosphor. This game was amazing from the moment I dropped in. The graphics have this 90s, early 2000s polygonal look to them that made it feel like I was playing Halo 1. I loved it. I started out with a sniper rifle, which tripped me out because the scope automatically zooms in when you ADS. What the hell? But once I got the hang of this gun, it ended up actually being my favorite. Okay, got you, and then... whoop. Oh. Oh. Get out! You start out with a random weapon, but much like Quake, there's a larger arsenal of guns that you can access by finding them scattered around the map. There's a default machine gun that you can't scope in with, which does decent damage but isn't particularly interesting. Think Halo assault rifle. There's the pulse gun, which I thought looked really cool and really pretty, but just made me laugh because of how far you have to lead your shots. And the absolute most powerful gun, the rocket launcher. This thing is so much fun to use because it just does an absurd amount of damage, but it also has so much knockback you could just send people flying. Also, this is a weird side note, but the game freezes you in place and shows your character in 3D when the match ends, but this happened while I was in midair turning around, so I got this sick action shot. I just had to share that. All in all, I wish this game had servers to play on because I thought this one was really fun. Despite its relative simplicity, this game does a great job capturing the vibes and the fun of boomer shooters in a free-to-play online game. But within the same program that I found Phosphor, I was also able to find another game that was mentioned at least once in the comments of the last video, and that is Combat 3. Bouncing off the idea of simplicity I mentioned in that first game, this one is as basic as a video game can be. Like, literally the version on Flashpoint is just a test demo where all you can do is run around a single Minecraft map. But thankfully, I was able to find a version of the same game, which is still online, Combat Reloaded. This game does have a server browser, so I decided to hop in the first server I saw with 10 out of 12 players. I instantly recognized the layout of this map as a Minecraft build of Nuketown, so I immediately felt at home. But unfortunately, like many of the games in the previous video, this match was just filled with people who I assume were bots. So I backed out and tried to find another lobby, only to be greeted with an ad. Oh, come on! When I came back, I was on this castle map where I was able to pretty easily wander around and rack up some kills. A lot of these people were moving like bots, but there were a few in this lobby that stuck out to me as like actual possible players just because they seemed a little bit competent. And just full transparency, there's not a ton of depth to this one, but I played it way longer than I had any right to. Like, it's just fighting bots using a bunch of stolen assets, but for some reason this game just grabbed me. It weirdly reminded me of being like 14 and watching YouTubers play TTT, Trouble in Terrorist Town, on Gmod, so it was very fun and nostalgic in that way. I got this revolver at one point where you magically reload it by tapping the bottom of the handle with your hand, but it's an instant kill headshot, and once I realized that, I just started to go off. Again, I am almost certain that all of these are bots, so it's not like this is much of a feat, but it just felt satisfying to try to line up these headshots. By all objective metrics, this game should not be fun, but I still found myself having a good time clicking around with the bots, so honestly, good job Combat Reloaded. Combat's a decent game. Alright, moving on. This one commenter mentioned 3 different games in one comment, so I thought I had to play at least one of them, right? Unfortunately, Soldier Front 2 and Blacklight Retribution weren't possible to get running in 2025, but Dirty Bomb, on the other hand, is still on Steam, and oh my god, let me tell you, this one is a blast. This is probably the only game on this list that was made with any real story or intent or an idea of trying to make money back on an investment, frankly. This game starts you out with this in-world tutorial introducing you to the game's universe and basic mechanics. It's just a basic hero shooter, which I had initially assumed to be inspired by Overwatch's hype, but this game came out as free to play a year before Overwatch released, and I know stuff like TF2 already existed, so it wasn't a new idea, but I'm just surprised. This game just felt very directly Overwatch inspired, which is so strange because there's no connection at all. Although the game's presentation reminded me a lot more of a game like The Finals, with this somewhat corporate tongue-in-cheek vibe, but I found it to have some charm just given how old it is. Like, considering the game came out a decade ago, it's a bit more forgivable for it to have this kind of corporate Ubisoft level of dialogue, just because 10 years ago it wasn't as common. The only real downside to this game that I have to say is that the whole thing is British. But like I said before, this game is by far the highest quality one that I'm going to be talking about on this list. After I finished the brief tutorial, I started searching for a match, which unsurprisingly the game wasn't able to find, but I somehow got extremely lucky and searched the server browser to find a fan-run server that was still alive. Like, I went back the next day and that same server was completely empty, and I've gone back multiple other times and it's been the same story. So I just got really lucky the first day that I was trying to record this game, and there happened to be people online. But oh my god, am I glad I was able to get online at the exact right moment, because this game is so much goddamn fun. Playing this game, I was so mad that I had never heard of it prior to playing it for this video, because I would have eaten this shit up. Nom nom nom. I hated that. Cut that. This game is a class-based hero shooter, much like TF2 or Overwatch, as I said, where the main objective is to push a payload through a map, but the weapons have more of an almost Black Ops semi-realistic vibe to them that grounds the game somewhere between being more realistic military shooter and being a goofy arcade game, although obviously it's leaning more into that goofy arcade side. I gravitated towards the medic class in the game as they had the fastest movement speed and a shotgun, which felt very similar to my TF2 main.
Boom! If you were from where I was from, you'd be dead.
Playing this game in a server full of people who have actually been playing this game for the past decade was such an amazing contrast to playing so many of these dead and empty games. While I'd say it is fair to call Dirty Bomb a dead game, it was very much alive in this server. Some of my favorite moments I had playing this game were just trying to revive people or place my healing items, but as a healer, you get to still do a good deal of damage, so alongside these healing moments, I was still able to get some nice clips with the shotgun. I got shot from behind! No, I missed! No, I missed again! No, I missed a third time! No, I missed a fourth time! No, I missed a fifth time! No, I missed again! No, I keep missing! During one of the matches, I decided to ask everyone how long they'd been playing the game, to which most people responded since the game's launch. And then the head of the server let me know that he's personally been running this server off of donations through his Twitch, Melon Popper, which I will leave a link to if anyone is interested in trying to keep this game alive. I generally don't like shouting out servers or like third-party type stuff like this on this channel, but I had such an awesome time playing this game, and it was only made possible because of the dedicated work of these fans keeping the game alive. So I felt like it was only right to directly thank Melon for making this game playable, because if he wasn't there hosting the server, this wouldn't even be in the video. This game is still up on Steam, and it's still free to play, so if you never played it in its prime, I would honestly suggest giving it a chance. I found it to be so much better than I was expecting. And with Dirty Bomb being on Steam, we can kind of transition into the next category of games I want to talk about, which are games that started online but then migrated over to Steam. There's actually a lot of games in this category that started as a browser game and then eventually made their way into the child gambling den. This strat worked with varying degrees of success for different games, with some of them surviving the monetization by actually providing something worth your money, while others never received updates beyond their free-to-play versions to justify the added price tag. One such example of an online free-to-play game turning into a paid Steam failure is Red Crucible 2. This game is on Steam under the name War Trigger, but from everything I've been able to find about it, it is the exact same game. There were multiple versions of Red Crucible released over the years, all of which are accounted for on Steam, but renamed with this War Trigger branding. Red Crucible Reborn is War Trigger 2, the Firestorm update is War Trigger 3, A Dream is Just a Wish Your Heart Makes, and the original Red Crucible 2 experience is listed as War Trigger Trigger Classic. However, now, instead of being free to play in browser, they're charging 20 whole United States dollars for it. This is the exact same game that was already on Congregate for free for years, but now that there's no one online to play it, they decided it's worth $20. Absolutely abysmal marketing decision that I can't even begin to understand. But thankfully, all of the other versions of this game are free to play, which is very strange to me considering these are all just updates of the same base game. Anyway, I downloaded War Trigger 3 and decided to give it a shot. Before we get into this, I know that this is some of your guys' childhood game that you grew up with and you love, so I'm gonna try to be nice, but oh my god, I don't think I have ever been more frustrated playing a video game for this channel than I was playing this game. Off the bat, the movement was a nightmare. At all times, it feels like there's a weight tied to your feet restricting your movement. Like, imagine how it feels when you're holding down shift to walk in Counter-Strike, but that's the base movement speed. That's just how you move. You can move faster by sprinting, but you can only do it forwards, which means strafing is entirely impossible, as your side-to-side movement is 20 times slower than your forward movement. From looking at gameplay of more skilled players, it seems like the meta is to just jump around while sprinting to maintain that movement speed, but it feels like you shouldn't fucking have to do that. I feel like you should just be able to walk in a video game. I don't know, that's maybe crazy. However, the biggest issue I have with this game was how many times I died from enemies who hadn't even made it around the corner yet. This game has by far the worst connection I have ever seen in a multiplayer shooter, which means you almost never actually see the person who killed you. Every time I died, it seemed like the enemy showed up on my screen a solid second or two after the game already decided they hit me. This feeling of what the fuck just happened is even further exacerbated by an absurdly quick time to kill, which usually isn't a bad thing, but in this case, combined with the shaky connection, means that 99% of the time you can't react to being shot at before you're already dead. And to further top off this frustration, there's a third-person exploit you can do where you're able to look over walls and around corners to see enemies well before they could see you. It's like COD head glitching on crack. This combined with some of the really shitty collision on a lot of the maps means there's multiple areas where you can go into third person and just immediately get wall hacks, and I'm fairly certain a lot of my unfair deaths were just from people using this to see me before I could see them. However, despite all of these complaints, I still ended up playing this game for a fair amount of time, like well beyond what I needed for the video. I don't know if I'm a masochist or what, but this game actually has a good amount of charm under the surface. You have a decent variety of weapons that you can unlock just through the gameplay and a pretty detailed attachment system. The gunplay actually felt good in terms of aiming and shooting. Hitting targets feels satisfying, and the low time to kill means that you can chain targets together, which pretty easily leads to some fun multi-kill potential, with each kill being rewarded with this on-screen banner and sound effect, which is very obviously COD inspired, but that was all just a plus to me. I can imagine if I played this game as a kid who loved COD but wasn't able to play it at a young age, I would have gone completely feral over this game, and every single complaint that I just made would have been completely washed away just by the fact I could play COD on my MacBook. I ended up giving this game way more of a solid chance after those first couple matches I got into, and I realized a lot of my frustration was really with a few skilled players who have likely just been playing this game forever. But once I got into matches with more players at my level, I started to get more comfortable with the still pretty janky movement, but I started to have some more fun. This game is buggy as fuck, and the movement is still objectively bad, but as a free-to-play browser game from 2012, this game's pretty awesome actually, and I can see why it stuck out to so many of you guys. Alright, now we're moving from a game that I assume most of you played to a game that I assume none of you have ever played, but I still had to include because it's so stupid, it's so good, I have to talk about this. I'm gonna be so honest, this game did not need to be in the video. I only got one comment about it, but as soon as I looked it up and saw what it actually was, I knew I had to include it. This game technically is not free, it costs $1, but so does my iCloud subscription because I refused to delete all of my photos from 2015, so honestly there's worse ways to lose $1. The second that you launch this game, you're awarded with every single achievement in the game, which is just the entire alphabet. And shockingly, this game has a server browser with people who are online. As soon as you drop into the game, you can realize that this game is just someone messing around with Unity assets, but it's so absurd that it's still fun. The game is in a third-person perspective, and you're able to stick to walls when you jump on them, so you can just climb up the side of most objects. The main gun you're using is this AK, but you also have this weird pirate-ass grenade launcher, a pistol, and a knife. And weirdly, the process of jumping around while swapping these weapons reminded me a lot of Fortnite. Like, I kept feeling feeling like I was pumping 90s. Hold on. How do you say? I don't know the Fortnite slang. I need pumping Fortnite? What does it? Cranking 90s. Oh god, never mind. I don't know what we're talking about anymore. That joke went over my head. But anyway, this game kind of reminded me of Fortnite. That was the point. This game's movement felt surprisingly good for such a goofy game, and I actually found the combat to be weirdly competitive compared to a lot of the other games I played, which felt a lot more one-sided. It was just really satisfying to jump around with an enemy trying to time grenades to hit them right when they're about to end their jump and hit the ground. Like, that was weirdly fun for such a goofy overhaul game. It's also just really fun to try to line up shots with the normal guns on targets who are actively propelling themselves across the entire map. This game is dumb, but I was pleasantly surprised to find that there was way more depth to the gameplay than just haha monkey funny. But let's be honest, that's still the best part of this game. Seeing the ape models leap around the map using modern weapons to fight each other is just so beautifully absurd, and that is the core of why this game is so funny and just silly. And to even further underline this absurdity, the second match that I got into was on a backrooms map, which just fits how silly this game is. I don't think this game is trying to be anything more than a goofy, like, Unity asset flip to play with your friends for a couple hours, but if that's its goal, it achieves that with absolute perfection. It does its job so well. Shout out Ape War. It's worth $1. And now moving to the total opposite end of the spectrum of game quality, I'm not gonna lie, I was absolutely terrified to play this game because it effectively feels like trying out for a football team for the first time as a kid and then getting put in practice against an NFL playoff team. The only people who play this game still have been playing Quake since they still had light in their eyes 20 years ago, so I was beyond intimidated to try this one out. But despite that expectation going in, this ended up being my absolute favorite game on this list. This game is tight, this game is polished, this is a good video game. I know it should be obvious given that it's classic that has held up for so many years, but I was shocked just how much of a blast I could have personally. As someone whose first idea of what Quake was shooting fireworks out of wooden hose on Minecraft, this game is fast! Like, I was genuinely shocked at how fast this game is. COD movement fiends who spend the whole match slide canceling wouldn't survive a fucking second in one of these lobbies. I can't tell if playing games like this for 30 plus years would keep you mentally alert or just melt your brain with overstimulation, but who cares? I got the railgun and I'm about to go on a spree. Let's fucking go. The vast majority of the time I spent playing this game was spent running into combat and then dying within half a second, but that wasn't frustrating in the slightest because the moments between those deaths were so exciting and chaotic I could not possibly make myself mad. Of all of the matches I played, I think I only ended one of them with a positive kill-death ratio, but I know for a fact I ended all of them with a smile on my face. The movement in this game is so good. You're doing backflips off of wall jumps into a heel flip into a bounce pad off this guy's right ass cheek. Like, damn, it's just high octane shit the whole time. And the variety of weapons in this game is so fun, from the melee being this laser saw to plasma guns and rocket launchers and shotguns. I personally love the shotgun. Being able to get close enough to get instant kills while jumping around people is so satisfying, but every gun has its own charm and purpose. I will fully admit that this is my first real experience with a real Quake game in general, so most of my excitement probably just stemmed from the fact that Quake is a good game franchise in general, but I felt like this game in particular was a really great launching point for someone unfamiliar with the series, and given the quality of this game, it is a shock to me that they ever gave it away for free. Like, this absolutely is worth the price tag. They could charge more and I still think it would be worth it. This game is awesome. Unlike all of the other games in this video that I've talked about so far, I actually do have footage of me playing this game in its prime era because, believe it or not, I already played this game on this channel 11 years ago. Yes, if you were unaware, the current iteration of this channel is not my first attempt at being a YouTuber, because back in 2014, I had a used MacBook and a dream, and I would record myself playing games with my voice only slightly louder than the fucking industrial fan blowing out of the side of the MacBook. But in that process, I did actually play this game in the original browser version on release, so let's take a quick look at that.
Super hot. And it's a game, malicious gaming game.
Oh, for fuck's sake. Oh, for fuck's sake. But for a more modern look back at this game is still one of the coolest, most innovative things I have ever played. When I was 14, I adored the concept. Now that I'm 25, I still fucking love it. If you somehow aren't aware of the basic gimmick in this game, it is that time only moves when you move. So if you're standing still, everything's frozen, and the faster you start walking, the faster time speeds up. This leads to some really awesome Matrix-esque moments where you're able to dodge bullets midair and grab people's guns out of the air right after kicking them. The whole game uses this minimalist art style, which works really well for what the game is. The whole thing feels very trippy and dreamlike, with this bold flashing text on screen and the deep robotic voice going super hot. Super hot. The whole demo can be finished in under 15 minutes, but I feel like that's just enough time to show off this really interesting concept, and considering all this was really meant to be was a proof of concept for the bigger game that ended up coming out later, this is great. Another category that these games can fall into is dead but resurrected in a slightly different form, like McDonald's Chicken Selects or Jesus Christ. This category is for games whose original hosts have since deleted the game, but whose fans have taken it upon themselves to keep it alive. There's only two games that I found that would fit into this category, one that fits much more cleanly than the other, so we're gonna start with that one, and that is Begone. This game is perhaps the one game that I got the most comments about, and I am so sad that I can't play it in its true form in 2025. The problem with this game, and frankly a lot of the games I wanted to play that you guys commented about, was that a good number of them run off of Unity Web Player, an obsolete extension that isn't supported by any modern web browsers. I was able to find the game linked on some sites, but when you launch the game in a modern browser, it obviously tells you that the browser can't support Unity Web Player. The problem? No browser that can run these sites can run Unity Web Player. Like, I thought I was finally onto something when I found that you can run older versions of Internet Explorer through a dumb workaround in Windows settings, but even through this, I was able to get the game to start in Unity Web Player, but then I couldn't get into the game itself because you have to connect to their current servers, so you can't use an old... It's a whole thing. It didn't work. I tried. But thankfully, I was able to find a fan recreation of the game that's actually fairly recent. As of writing the script, this project hasn't had any updates since January of this year, but the fact that there is an update on this game less than a year ago is just wild in itself. They have a demo on their site, which is actually playable in browser just like the old game. Unfortunately, it has no active servers and is more of a proof of concept than anything, with visibly missing animations and only 2 maps to play on. However, it's a start that, if developed upon further, could actually become a viable replacement for this browser game that clearly impacted enough people positively that it was the second most talked about game in my comments last time. However, this next one I am putting in the same category, but I wasn't exactly sure how to classify it because technically it is now known as a fan reproduction called Build and Shoot. But when you actually install and run Build and Shoot, it's just the game Ace of Spades. I actually do remember playing this game a bit back in the day, as my friends and I were huge fans of Minecraft, so Minecraft with guns was just a natural fit. The original game isn't playable in browser anymore, but through Build and Shoot, they've made it possible to run the original game as a download, where you can still actually host and join servers. This game is so much fun. As I described it previously, it's basically just Minecraft with guns, so it's a team shooter, but you're able to destroy the environment and place blocks. When I first launched this game, there were 2 servers, each with only 1 person in it, and so I decided to join one of them and found the other player who was actually a real person playing the game. Since there were only 2 of us, neither one of us seemed to really want to fight, so we decided to just make peace and start building a stairway up into heaven. No! Eventually more people started joining, and by the time we finished the stairs, we had almost a full lobby, so we decided to actually play the game proper. My absolute favorite part of this game was just seeing how much the flow of the match changed depending on how our actions were shaping the map itself. Like, the first bits of combat that we had were surrounding this staircase as a central point, which led to some really funny moments where enemies were shooting the ground out from under us. But once we knew that plan wasn't going to work, we started to burrow into the walls and slowly peek out, which led to an entirely different combat dynamic. I just thought it was so cool how the game allows you to mold your environment while actively engaging in combat with other people. It just gives a very unique gameplay experience that I don't know other games have been able to match. My absolute favorite moment came towards the end of my time playing this game when, after getting shot a few times in my spawn from the top of the map, I decided to make it over to the enemy spawn and do the same to them. This took a while as I kept getting killed on my way up the cliffside, but once I made it onto the very top of the map, I started digging in trenches like I was on the Western Front, occasionally peeking up from cover to get kills while inching towards the enemy camp. That was just a really cool moment that wouldn't be possible in any other game. game and was not an intentional design in this game, but was just an instance that I had because of a decision I made. And the fact that the game allowed for that decision to be made is just really cool. After my trench got compromised, I decided to just run across the top, trying to get to the enemy spawn as fast as I could, which actually worked, granting me 3 cheap shots before I got sniped myself. This game was so much fun, and I'm so glad it is still playable in 2025. If you played this game as a kid, or even if you didn't, I would suggest checking it out. Everyone that I interacted with on this game was super sweet, and I found that the community was mostly made of people who used to play the game back in the day, so it's really sweet to see that on some random Thursday afternoon I was able to boot up this game and still get a match going. I love this game. And now for the absolute best category that a game can fall into on this list, games that are still actually live and actually have hosted websites and you can play them in browser. Wow, look at that, a browser game you can play in browser. I don't think this category needs more explanation, so let's just hop into it. Starting off with a game I only got 1 comment about, but one that I ended up absolutely falling in love with, Forward Assault Remix. This game is hosted by our friends over at Crazy Games, so you already know it's going to be some pretty decent bubble slop, and that is exactly what this game is. It seems like at its core it wants to be a Counter-Strike clone because you start each round buying weapons, the map's characters and weapons all seem like they're out of Counter-Strike, and most of the guns can't ADS, but then there's hit markers like COD, a damage indicator like COD, and the overall flow of the game feels way more akin to something like COD than CS. But that's exactly why I like this game so much. For being a free-to-play online game, this game's actually pretty high quality. While I assume most of the assets were just flipped or stolen, the graphics in this game are pretty decent, with the lighting and textures all up to my standard for what I'd expect from a modern game. Like, if you showed me this next to Valorant, I would not be able to tell you that one of them is more popular than the other, quite genuinely. Another thing I loved about this game was the fact you can customize your crosshair like in CS, so I was able to recreate the crosshair I always used in that game. This game's awesome. There are some loot boxes and microtransactions and a battle pass that you get hit with when you launch the game, but I didn't feel like they tried too hard to push any of that. I was still able to fully enjoy the game without spending a cent. Good shit. Simple as they come. I just wanted to include this because I feel like it's a good modern version of the same type of game we've been talking about, and it makes me happy that there's still some contemporary version of the same thing that we played as kids, for kids now. Like, even in the world of Genshin Impacts and Fortnites, there's still for some reason a purpose for these games to exist. I don't know what that purpose is, but I'm so glad they're there because now I can make a video about them. This one was a game I only got 1 comment about, so I'm not going to focus on it too long, but it had some charm, so I thought it was worth at least mentioning. This game is about as generic as a multiplayer shooter can be. It feels really similar to games like Crunker, but more of a cartoony graphic style that reminded me of Venge. But what instantly made this game stick out to me was the movement. Anytime you press shift while moving, your character lunges forward and slides across the ground like they're about to fucking blow a World Series and lose to the Dodgers! This feature alone takes the game from being an unnotable online shooter to something I actually ended up getting stuck playing for way longer than I needed to. On top of this, one of the 4 major weapons that you get to pick from is an AWP, which, if you watched the last video, you already know what's about to happen. Just run the clips. Genuine, actual apologies to any kids whose afternoons I ruined because getting sniped in this game is genuinely annoying. Like, I had a moment towards the end of my time playing where I got into a match with people using golden skins who clearly play the game a lot, and every time I got killed by one of them, it made me feel like that prisoner in the SpongeBob episode. I was like, shit, that's what I've been doing to people? That fucking sucks, what? I could just keep showing clips of me sniping in this game, but I figure no one actually wants to see that. So instead, I'm just gonna move on to our next game, which is one of the most mentioned in the comments of the last video, and that is Warmerise. Warmerise. This game is shockingly still playable in browser, although it weirdly does make you link your Discord to play. Unfortunately, this game doesn't have any active servers up, and there's no way to spawn in bots, so we just get to explore these empty liminal spaces together. This game seems like it was great, from the movement to the weapons to the vehicles. You have a double jump and a jetpack, which is, pun intended, a blast to fly around with, and the basic controls like running and aiming feel tight and snappy. This is a well-built video game. You do get the option of zooming out to third person, but I decided to keep it in first person for most of my time playing. The graphics have this late 90s, early 2000s charm to them. I seriously miss when games were this bright and legible. Like, the 2 maps I played on were objectively beautiful. Like, even compared to stuff I've seen in 2025, I thought these were gorgeous, and it didn't require ray tracing or AI upscaling or any of that NVIDIA DLSS bullshit. It's just good art direction, and it's still holds up. I miss games like this. Like, it does not fucking matter how many polygons are on the object if it's just gonna be lit from a single light source that looks like shit. Have some creative vision, please. Of all of the games I played, this is the one that I am by far the most disappointed that I wasn't able to play online against anyone, because it seems so awesome. There's a surprising level of depth with you being able to unlock upgrades for your abilities, and even being able to unlock a pilot license that lets you fly vehicles. This game very clearly has a ton going for it, and I really wish I could do more than just show off these maps, but for now, that is the best I can do, and even that's pretty good, because goddamn, these are pretty. Now moving to the category of less throwback games and more just modern games that fit into the larger category of browser games. This game actually is one that was mentioned quite a bit in the comments of the last video, and it is Narrow One. This game is interesting because instead of guns, it's based entirely around using bows. The menu for this game is as minimal as possible, with the launch screen just being text telling you to click to join. Clicking randomly matches you into a server and instantly puts you in a game, but you do also have the option to choose a specific map, but even here you are put into a random lobby, which is totally fine. I just do wish there was a server browser. Very small critique, doesn't really matter. The game itself is super simple, but so much fun. The whole thing almost feels like a mobile game because of the graphics, which frankly turned me off of the game initially because it reminded me of those shitty 2020 mobile game ads. But after judging a book by its cover, I actually got into it and realized how much fun it is. There's a variety of bows that you have at your disposal, and unsurprisingly, once I found the sniper bow, that was the one I had the most fun with, so I stuck with it for most of the time played. But all of the weapons have their uses and are pretty unique and interesting. There are 3 types of bow and 3 types of crossbow, each with a light, medium, and heavy variant for each. I said each twice there. The light bow lets you charge up multiple arrows at a time and fire them faster but at a shorter range than the standard bow, which itself does not have really any special traits. I didn't spend much time using either one of these because they both did significantly less damage than the heavy bow, which shoots much slower but can drop enemies in only 2 hits like a sniper. On the crossbow side, you have a light crossbow, which requires a ton of shots to take out an enemy, but allows you to move the fastest of all the weapons, so it kind of makes up for it. The medium crossbow is the most interesting weapon in the game by far because it's basically just a minigun but loaded with arrows, but my absolute favorite weapon in the game was the heavy crossbow because it does the same amount of damage as the heavy bow, but you can notch your shots ahead of time, so as soon as you get into combat, all it takes is a single click to drop someone's health to under half. I personally had so much fun using this bow, but with the variety of weapons, I'm sure anyone could find a weapon to match their specific playstyle. This game's really good at that. However, the best thing about this game is that it knows exactly what it is, and it's not trying to be anything else. By this, I mean it's not trying to copy any other games, it's not trying to sell you loot boxes or microtransactions, it's not trying to evolve in a paid Steam title. It is just a simple online game where you could shoot arrows at your friends, and it is so fundamentally aware of this fact to its own merit. The game reminds me a lot of Shell Shockers in this way. Like, a lot of these games on this list could be considered cheaper or worse versions of other games, like how many times have I compared a game to CS or COD in this video, but because this game is so unique, there's no room for comparisons to be drawn. I can't see this as a worse version of another game because I don't know another game like this, and this is perhaps Narrow One's greatest strength and probably why I never had trouble finding a match on this game, while a lot of these others have been abandoned. Check this one out if you haven't. It is a really good time, and honestly, like the gold standard of what I think a modern browser game should be. This is wonderful. And finally, I saved this game for last because it was by far the most mentioned game on the last video, and that is Contract Wars. As many of you mentioned last time, this is an in-browser free-to-play game from the creators of Escape to Tarkov, and oh boy howdy, can you instantly tell. This game is by far the most realistic of all of the ones we've covered. This one is really fun. It is more tactical and slow-paced than most of the games we've been talking about, but the matches I got into were on small enough maps that there was still enough, like, engagements happening to keep the game interesting. The weapon customization is super in-depth, with each slot containing a variety of options, each with their own kits and attachments you can further customize. I didn't honestly play long enough to utilize this feature much, but I love that it's there. My one and only complaint about this game is that for some reason when you full screen the game, it opens in a different window that Shadowplay doesn't recognize as a window. So my first match I recorded just the main menu and sound effects, but eventually I did figure out how to capture the gameplay properly. I spent most of my time playing this game on this map filled with shipping containers that just kept giving me war flashbacks to playing Shipment 24/7. Getting a server going on this game was actually really difficult because there are so few people still playing it. However, I was eventually able to fill out a lobby after just sitting around in an empty server for a while waiting for people to join. Once the server was full, I was scared to leave because I knew as soon as I left, getting another match together was going to be almost impossible. So I ended up spending a good chunk of time playing with these same people. As I said before, this game is way more tactical than any of the others we talked about, which makes a lot of sense given its Tarkov connection, but it still has many elements of a more arcadey shooter like Call of Duty. This mesh of design philosophies leads to a really interesting play experience where you walk around the map rather than running and slowly peek around corners more like a survival shooter, but when you do get into engagements and you die, you just respawn and you can keep fighting more like an arcade shooter. This creates a really nice balance of feeling like you need to work to survive, but it's still totally possible to go on less realistic COD-esque killing sprees. It's a really nice balance that I think this game manages quite well. There's a lot of guns in this game, but I ended up just sticking with this basic AR most of the time as it was the most powerful weapon I could afford. For a couple lives I tried using this double barrel shotgun to very limited success, so I just swapped right back. This game visually looks the best of all the games we've played by a mile. They could easily charge money for this if they wanted to, so the fact that it's still free to play is pretty amazing. The connection is solid, the frame rate is solid, the hit detection feels good. I genuinely have no complaints of this game that aren't based in user error. This game rocks, and I can see why so many of you recommended it. I do have to say I'm not a fan of slower tactical shooters, so when it was mentioned that there was a Tarkov related game, I did get a little scared, but it is so much fun. It is great for a browser game. I love this. I see why it was the most mentioned thing. It's polished, it's pretty. I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but goddamn, this game is awesome, and I just wanted to have an excuse to put it on the screen a little longer, because now this brings us to the end of the video. In this list, I tried to include every game that got at least 2 comments from the last video, so I do apologize if I missed any of your personal favorite games. Perhaps I should do a part 3 of this series. There was only one game that I really wanted to play that just wasn't possible to even get running, which was Offensive Combat, because I got a couple comments about that one, but unfortunately the servers are down. I tried. Apparently they are still charging money for that one on Steam, despite the fact you can't actually run the game, which is kind of shitty, but other than that one example, I actually was able to get to almost every single one of your guys' childhood games that you mentioned, so I feel like this video was a success. Thank you so much for support on the last browser game video. Hopefully this one does alright. I don't know. This video took a little bit longer to get out than I was hoping, but it is here now, so better late than never. I hope everyone enjoyed. I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I've never asked to like and subscribe before, and I'm not going to start now, but I just said the 2 words, and apparently if you mention those 2 words, you get better metrics. So let's test it. Let's find out. All right. See you guys later. Hope you have a good rest of your day. I'm ending this like I'm ending a stream, but I'm not. All right. Goodbye. What the fuck was that?